It was supposed to be just another ordinary Tuesday. The air in Boston was heavy with the smell of late autumn, wet leaves, damp concrete, and a hint of roasted chestnuts from a nearby street vendor. Professor Ethan Cole tugged the collar of his coat tighter as he stepped through the glass doors of the Dudley Branch Library. The cold snapped at his cheeks. He wasn't here for research today. He just needed quiet, a rare thing in the buzzing halls of Harvard. He was tired. Years of teaching advanced mathematics and juggling department politics had worn him down more than he liked to admit. He was working on a paper that few would understand and fewer would read. The weight of irrelevance was creeping in, like a whisper at the back of his mind. The library was almost empty, just the way he liked it. As he passed by rows of chipped wooden tables and flickering desk lamps, he saw her. At first, he barely noticed. A small figure hunched over a notebook, sleeves too long, sneakers a bit too worn, braids falling in front of her face as she scribbled furiously. Just a kid, he thought. But something about her posture stopped him. Not the slump of boredom or defeat, no, this girl was focused. Electric. Like the world outside her spiral notebook didn't exist. Ethan slowed down. He looked again, and that's when he saw it. The page was filled edge to edge with mathematical symbols, clean and deliberate. Not arithmetic. Not high school algebra. No. These were differential equations. Partial derivatives. Matrix notations. His chest tightened. Who in the world had taught this child to write Lagrange multipliers? He stepped closer, heart suddenly pounding like he was back in grad school and about to defend his thesis. She noticed him before he could speak. Her pencil paused midair. "You're staring," she said plainly. Caught, Ethan smiled awkwardly. "Sorry. I didn't mean to. I was just curious." She looked back down at her page. "I'm working." "Looks like it." He gestured toward the notebook. "Mind if I ask what you're solving?" "Trying to optimize a multivariable function," she replied without looking up. "But the constraint equation is giving me trouble." Ethan blinked. "Do you mind if I take a look?" She hesitated. A flicker of suspicion in her eyes. Then, slowly, she turned the notebook around. Ethan leaned in. The problem was handwritten from scratch. No copying. She had defined the function, written the constraint, identified the gradient, and attempted to apply the method of Lagrange. There were minor missteps, sure, but they were the kinds of errors a second-year undergrad might make, not a child. "How old are you?" he asked. 12, she replied. "Where did you learn this?" "Books. YouTube. Sometimes Khan Academy, but I like real books better." She tilted her head. "Why?" Ethan sat down across from her without asking. His brain was firing in 1,000 directions. She wasn't just gifted. She was doing this alone. No instruction. No structure. Just raw intuition and curiosity. "I'm a professor at Harvard," he said slowly, as if trying to believe it himself. "I've taught students twice your age who couldn't solve this." The girl raised one eyebrow. So, he said, "I think what you're doing is incredible." She shrugged. "It's just math. It's like music. Once you get the patterns, it sings." That line hit him in the chest. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a clean sheet of paper. With a borrowed pencil from her side of the table, he wrote down an equation, one of the unsolved ones from a recent lecture. A classic problem involving nonlinear optimization and saddle points. No hints. No context. He slid it toward her. She looked at it, squinted, and muttered, "Ugh, piecewise domains." Then she got to work. 10 minutes passed in silence. Ethan didn't interrupt. He just watched. The girl, he still didn't know her name, tried 3 approaches, crossed two of them out, then pivoted to a matrix-based method using Jacobians. Her thought process was erratic but elegant, like someone trying to solve a Rubik's Cube with closed eyes but still getting closer to the solution each turn. When she finally put the pencil down, she pushed the page back across the table. "I think this part is wrong," she pointed to her last matrix. "But if the constraint is convex, then the second-order condition would still hold. Right?" Ethan stared at the page. She had gotten further than most grad students. No calculators. No notes. Just, her. He leaned back and let out a breath. "What's your name?" "Amara," she said simply. "Amara Johnson." "Amara," he repeated. "Do you come here often?" "Only when it's quiet," she said. "School's loud. Teachers think I'm cheating if I get stuff right too fast." Something inside him twisted. That familiar ache, when brilliance is mistaken for trouble. When a system built to standardize everyone doesn't know what to do with someone who colors outside the lines. "Do your parents know you're this gifted?" he asked gently. "My mom works nights. She's tired a lot. I don't think she really notices." Ethan paused. Then asked carefully, "Would you mind if I talk to her?" Amara's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "I want to see if I can help," he said. "You're not just smart, Amara. You're extraordinary. And I think the world needs to see it." She leaned back, arms crossed. "You don't even know me." "You're right," he nodded. "But I know what it looks like when someone's been ignored for too long." There was silence. Outside, the wind pushed a swirl of yellow leaves against the window. Then she said softly, "We live on Blue Hill Avenue. Apartment 3C. You can come by tomorrow. But don't bring no TV cameras or nothing." Ethan chuckled. "No cameras. Just me." Amara nodded once, then picked up her notebook and backpack. She started to leave, then paused. "You really teach at Harvard?" "Swear on Gauss's grave." She grinned for the first time. "All right, Professor. See you tomorrow." And just like that, she was gone. Ethan sat there long after she left, staring at the equation she'd nearly solved. His heart was racing, not because of the math, but because he knew what he had just witnessed. Genius in the wild. A spark the world would have walked right past if he hadn't stopped. He pulled out his phone, opened the voice recorder, and whispered. "Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?" Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Blue Hill Avenue never slept, not really. The sounds of sirens, barking dogs, and late-night arguments drifted up through the cracked window of apartment 3C. The wallpaper was peeling, the kitchen faucet dripped constantly, and the radiator either hissed like a snake or didn't work at all. But none of that bothered Amara. She had learned to drown it out. Inside her small bedroom, barely wide enough to fit a twin mattress and a stack of milk crates filled with donated books, she sat on the floor, notebook in hand, headphones loosely resting around her neck. The room smelled like graphite and old paper, comfortingly familiar. She flipped through pages of scribbled equations, quick notes, and graphs sketched in blue and purple ink. This was her universe. While other girls her age were making TikToks or texting boys, Amara spent her nights unraveling logic puzzles, running through number theory problems, or watching blurry videos of MIT lectures on a second-hand tablet that froze every 12 minutes. It wasn't that she didn't want friends, she'd just learned that being smart wasn't always a good thing. Third grade was when it started. She had finished a math test in 3 minutes. The teacher accused her of cheating, even when she explained every answer out loud without the worksheet in front of her. Fourth grade, she stopped raising her hand. Fifth grade, she stopped talking altogether. By 6th grade, they called her Weird Girl Johnson. She didn't correct them. Let them think what they wanted. Let them roll their eyes when she checked out calculus books from the library. Let them think she was a freak. They didn't matter. But her mom did. Down the hall, Amara could hear her mother's low cough from the living room. Her shift at the diner had gone late again, and she'd fallen asleep on the couch in her work clothes. Amara tiptoed out of her room and gently pulled a blanket over her. Denise Johnson was 34 years old, worked 2 jobs, and hadn't taken a sick day in 5 years, not because she never got sick, but because sick days meant lost pay. She had raised Amara alone since her father left when she was still in diapers. No calls. No birthday cards. Just the echo of absence. She never complained, but Amara could read her body language like an open book. The way she rubbed her wrists after cleaning shifts. The winces she tried to hide when standing up too fast. The long silences when the rent was due. So Amara tried to be invisible. She never asked for toys. Never threw tantrums. Never made her mom feel like she had failed. Because she hadn't. Not once. If anything, Amara felt like she was the one who had let her mother down, by being too smart for a system that didn't know what to do with her. She had once asked her mom, if I were good at basketball instead of math, would people notice? Her mom had looked her dead in the eye and said, the world doesn't clap for black girls who solve equations. But you keep going, baby. You keep going anyway. Those words lived in her bones. The next day after school, Amara skipped her usual library stop and went straight home to clean up. Her hoodie was stained, her shoes scuffed beyond recognition, and her braids were frizzing out of their ties. If a Harvard professor was coming over, well, she didn't care what he thought, but she did care about how her mom might feel being caught off guard. She didn't tell her much, just that someone from school stuff was coming by to talk about her learning. Her mom had nodded slowly and said, I'll be home by 5. Don't let anyone in before then. At exactly 5:03 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Amara opened it halfway. Professor Cole was wearing the same tweed coat, but his eyes looked more nervous now. He was holding a manila folder and a small paper bag. Hi, he said, clearing his throat. I brought cookies. Store-bought. Don't judge. Amara gave him a skeptical look, then stepped aside. Their apartment wasn't much, but it was clean. The living room had mismatched furniture, a calendar that hadn't been flipped since August, and a flickering lamp with a lopsided shade. Denise was sitting on the couch, rubbing her temples. She stood when she saw Ethan. You're the teacher. Professor, technically, Ethan said, offering a polite smile. Ethan Cole. Harvard. Denise didn't shake his hand. She folded her arms. You said you saw my daughter at the library? Yes, ma'am. She was solving complex mathematical problems, college level, even graduate level. On her own. Denise raised an eyebrow. She didn't steal those books, did she? Amara groaned. Mom. I'm just checking, Denise said. You're saying my baby's a genius now? Ethan laughed gently. That's exactly what I'm saying. He sat down and opened the folder, revealing copies of Amara's notes from the previous day, annotated with little sticky notes and yellow highlights. He spoke with care, using terms both women could understand. She's operating at a mathematical level we rarely see outside research institutions. I've taught at Harvard for 17 years, and I've only seen raw intuition like hers twice. And what do you want with her? Denise asked. I want to help. No strings. I can get her into a gifted math program, just on weekends to start. Private tutoring. Access to better materials, mentors, maybe even scholarship options down the line. Denise hesitated. Is this gonna cost money? No, Ethan said. Not a cent. I've already spoken with a local nonprofit that sponsors students like Amara. They'd be thrilled to support her. Silence stretched for a moment. Denise looked at her daughter, who was pretending not to listen, flipping through a math journal she had already read 3 times. Why are you really doing this? Denise finally asked. Ethan looked her in the eye. Because I've seen what happens when kids like Amara fall through the cracks. Because I was one of them. That softened something in her. Denise sighed and sat down slowly. Okay. But she stays in regular school. She don't quit being a kid. Ethan smiled. Absolutely. She'll still be 12. Just 12 with better textbooks. He stood, gathering his things. Thank you for your time. I'll email you details. As he left, Amara followed him into the hallway. Hey, she said. Yeah. You're not gonna give up, right? If this gets messy. Ethan turned. Only thing I've ever been good at, is solving messy. She grinned. Just a little. And for the first time in her life, someone had looked at her not with pity, not with confusion. But with belief. Ethan Cole couldn't sleep. It was nearing 2 a.m., and the lights of his brownstone office near Harvard Square were still on. The street outside was quiet, save for the occasional whoosh of a passing car or the drunk laughter of students wandering back from the bars. His desk was littered with open textbooks, research drafts, coffee-stained lecture notes, and now, scattered pages of Amara Johnson's math problems, annotated like sacred texts. Her scrawled equations mingled with his neat handwriting. In another corner of the desk sat a framed photo of his late wife, Lauren, smiling beneath a tree during their honeymoon in Vermont. He rubbed his eyes, exhausted. But his mind wouldn't stop spinning. What if I'm overstepping? That question had been nagging him since he left Amara's apartment. Denise Johnson was right to be suspicious. He'd shown up like some academic savior, dropping the words Harvard and gifted like golden keys. What if it all went wrong? What if he raised this girl's hopes just to watch them get crushed by the very system that had failed so many others? Ethan knew how that story ended. He had lived it. Growing up in rural Ohio, in a trailer park with more broken windows than working light bulbs, Ethan had learned to do calculus on the back of gas bills while his parents fought in the next room. No one expected anything from him. Not the teachers. Not the neighbors. Not even his own family. Until one substitute teacher noticed his notebook during detention. A stranger. Someone who saw what everyone else ignored. He still remembered that man's name, Mr. Granger. A community college adjunct with nothing but cheap shoes and a PhD from somewhere no one respected. But that man had changed Ethan's life just by giving him a used textbook and a place to study after school. You're not broken, Ethan. You're just untested. Now Ethan was the tenured professor. He was the one holding the key. And Amara? She wasn't just untested. She was undiscovered. But the stakes were different now. He wasn't just some underpaid teacher with nothing to lose. He was part of the Harvard system, an institution with rules, hierarchies, and scrutiny around every corner. If he backed Amara too hard, it would raise eyebrows. If he pulled strings, he'd be accused of favoritism. If she failed, they'd say he wasted resources. And if she succeeded, they'd say he got lucky. Or worse, they'd question her legitimacy. Call it a diversity stunt or a fluke. That was the kind of world they were still living in. He stood and paced the room, muttering aloud to no one. She's not a charity case. She's a mathematician. But she was also a child. 12 years old. Carrying the weight of genius on a back too small to hold it. And already the signs were there, resentment from teachers, suspicion from peers, loneliness tucked behind sarcasm. If he pushed her into the deep end too fast, would she sink? Ethan ran a hand through his graying hair. He needed to talk to someone. He grabbed his phone, opened his contacts, and tapped the name, Dr. Camille Hartman. Camille was a former colleague, now working as director of the Newton Foundation for Advanced Youth Education, a nonprofit that identified and supported underprivileged gifted students. She was brilliant, no nonsense, and had saved more brilliant minds from systemic failure than anyone he knew. The phone rang twice before her groggy voice picked up. "Ethan, it's 1 a.m. I know. I'm sorry. But I think I found one." A pause. "You always think you found one." "No," he said. "This time it's real. Her name is Amara Johnson. 12 years old. Lives in Roxbury. She solved a multivariable optimization problem in 10 minutes, with no formal training. That got her attention." He could hear rustling on the other end of the line. "Is she enrolled in a gifted program?" "No. Public middle school. They think she's trouble because she won't shut up in math class." Camille let out a low whistle. "How'd you find her?" "She found me. At a public library." Another pause. Then, "You know the risks of this, Ethan." "I do. You bring a low-income black girl into Harvard's orbit, even as a guest, and everyone's going to have an opinion." "I know. If she cracks under pressure, they'll blame you." "I know. And if she succeeds, they'll try to minimize it. Or claim she had help." "I know," he said, voice sharper than he meant it to be. Then softer, "I just can't not help her. I see her, Camille. I see who she could be. I see what I almost wasn't." Silence. Then Camille said, "All right. I want to meet her. Bring her by the foundation this weekend. No promises yet, but I want to see how she thinks." He exhaled. "Thank you. And Ethan?" "Yeah. Be careful. Don't fall into the trap of making her your redemption arc. This isn't about you." He didn't answer. Because she was right. Later that week, Ethan sat through his faculty meeting like a ghost in the room. The usual complaints floated around: budget cuts, department politics, a visiting lecturer who couldn't stop citing himself. He barely heard any of it. Until Dean Richardson, the ever-composed department head, turned to him with a thin smile. "Ethan, I've heard you're working with a young protégé." Ethan blinked. Yes. I've been informally mentoring a young student outside the university." "Ah. I see. From where, if I may ask?" "Roxbury," he said evenly. The smile tightened. "Well, do keep us informed if your extracurricular outreach begins to affect your workload." A few soft chuckles around the table. Ethan didn't respond. He just sat there, suddenly reminded that even here, belief had its limits. That night, back in his office, he looked at Amara's notes again. She had been texting him photos of her problem sets throughout the week. Each time, he expected to see her plateau. Each time, she climbed higher. Her latest message read, "Do you think math can be a language for people who never get heard?" He stared at the text for a long time. Then he replied, "Yes. But only if someone's willing to listen." The gates of Harvard were taller than Amara imagined. Not just in size, but in weight. In history. In presence. It felt like they were built not to keep people in, but to keep people out. Amara clutched the straps of her backpack tighter as she followed Professor Cole through the yard. Students bustled past, heads down, AirPods in, coffee cups in hand. None of them looked like her. Most of them didn't even notice her. She was wearing her cleanest hoodie, black jeans, and her best sneakers, which were still peeling at the toes. Her braids were freshly tied back, but she still felt the invisible itch of being out of place. Too young. Too loud. Too poor. Too black. Professor Cole glanced back at her and smiled gently. "Nervous?" Amara looked around at the buildings, stone, ancient, proud. And nodded once. A little. He gestured toward a glass door ahead. This way. They stepped inside the science center. The change in atmosphere hit her like a gust of sterile air, bright white walls, echoing footsteps, fluorescent lights humming above. Students sat at round tables, hunched over laptops. Whiteboards filled with tangled equations lined the walls. It was like a temple built for numbers. And for the first time, she felt something stir beneath her anxiety. Excitement. This, Ethan said, holding open a door, is where we hold our Saturday math labs. It's informal. Think of it like a gym for your brain. Students from different programs come to solve problems, debate theories, or just eat free pizza and argue about Euler versus Gauss. Amara smirked. It's Euler, no contest. He grinned. You'll fit in fine. Inside the lab, a few older teens were already gathered. One of them, a tall South Asian boy with glasses and a chessboard-patterned hoodie, looked up and raised an eyebrow. You brought your niece. She's not my niece, Ethan said. This is Amara Johnson. She's 12. Try not to let her destroy your ego too quickly. The boy scoffed. 12. Amara stepped forward, chin high. Want to test me? Another girl at the table chuckled. I like her already. The tension melted a little. Ethan gestured toward a table near the whiteboard. We're doing group problems today. Nothing formal. I'll leave you to it. Amara took a deep breath and sat down. The paper in front of them displayed a geometry problem involving irregular polyhedra and surface area optimization. The boy in the chess hoodie passed her a pencil. You know how to integrate over a non-Euclidean surface? Amara blinked. Doesn't everyone? The boy snorted, but it wasn't mean-spirited. She could see the gleam in his eye, competition. They started solving. At first, it was chaos. Voices overlapped, approaches clashed. The others had formal vocabulary and polished manners, Amara had instinct and pure mental speed. But as the minutes passed, something beautiful happened. They started listening to her. Her ideas weren't just tolerated, they were used. Expanded on. Respected. By the end of the session, the whiteboard was filled with their solution. Professor Cole leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching quietly. He could already see it, the shift. Amara wasn't just surviving here. She was thriving. As they packed up, the girl who had laughed earlier turned to Amara. You coming next week? I think so, Amara said, trying not to sound too eager. Cool. We're doing proof challenges. Bring your A game. Amara smiled. I only have an A game. Later that afternoon, Ethan walked her back out toward the gates. How did it feel? He asked. She hesitated. Like I was speaking my real language for once. He nodded slowly. She looked up at him. But I'm not like them. In what way? I don't talk like them. I don't dress like them. My life isn't like theirs. No, he said. But neither was mine. And you know what? It didn't matter. Because math doesn't care where you came from. She considered that. But people care, she said quietly. That hit harder than he expected. Yes, he admitted. They do. But the right people will care for the right reasons. And the ones who don't? You solve your equations anyway. They reached the edge of the yard. She paused, looking back at the ivy-covered halls and bustling mines. You really think I belong here? He looked at her, this girl from Roxbury, with fire in her voice and galaxies behind her eyes, and said without hesitation. I think Harvard's lucky you even walked through the gate. That night, Amara sat on her bed, notebook open, but her pencil still. She couldn't focus. She kept thinking about the whiteboard. The group. The way they listened. The way it felt to belong, even for 1 hour. Then, slowly, she wrote at the top of a blank page. What if my brain is the ticket out? She didn't mean out of Boston. She meant out of invisibility. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan was composing an email to Camille. Subject, Amara, first session report. Camille. You need to see her in person. She's not just gifted. She's hungry. I'll be bringing her by next Saturday. I want her evaluated for full foundation sponsorship. Ethan. As he hit send, he looked again at the printout he'd brought home from the lab, a photo of the final whiteboard Amara and her team had filled. Right in the corner, she had signed it. AJ. No fuss. No full name. Just initials. But it was the boldness of the signature that struck him. She wasn't asking for space anymore. She was taking it. Monday morning hit hard. Amara had barely slept the night before, not from anxiety, but from adrenaline. Her brain wouldn't turn off. Equations still danced behind her eyelids. She replayed the moment someone had actually asked her what she thought instead of just telling her to sit down and be quiet. But as she walked through the cracked doors of William Carter Middle School, the high of Saturday drained fast. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Lockers slammed. Someone yelled down the hallway. The building smelled like bleach and overcooked tater tots. This wasn't Harvard's ivy-draped campus. This was back to reality. Amara kept her hood up. She made it to homeroom just as the bell rang. Ms. Peters, her math teacher, glanced at her and frowned. Nice of you to join us, Miss Johnson. Amara slid into her seat, pulling out her beat-up notebook. Her hands itched to keep writing out the proof she'd started the night before, but she forced herself to stay quiet. Today's lesson. Long division. On the board. 584 divided by 8 equals. Amara stared blankly. Not because she didn't understand it, but because it felt like asking a marathon runner to prove they could walk. She raised her hand. Yes. Ms. Peters said warily. Can I work ahead? I already mastered this 2 years ago. A few students snickered. Ms. Peters stiffened. You may not. You will complete the assignment like everyone else. But I. Amara, the teacher snapped. One more word, and I'll send you to the office. Amara clenched her jaw. She dropped her pencil. Sat in silence. The room moved on without her. Later, at lunch, she picked at a tray of soggy fries and mystery nuggets. Across the table, her classmate Kenya leaned in. You were in trouble again, she asked, almost gleeful. I just asked a question. Kenya rolled her eyes. Girl, you always acting like you better than everybody. I didn't say that, Amara muttered. You don't have to. That stung. But it wasn't the first time she'd heard it. Lately, everything she did felt like a crime. Reading during gym. Too weird. Solving math in her free time. Show off. Asking to skip work she'd already mastered. Arrogant. It didn't matter that she was bored out of her mind. That her brain was screaming to be challenged. All that mattered was she wasn't doing what the system expected her to do, blend in. Obey. Wait her turn. After lunch, the principal's voice came over the intercom. Amara Johnson, please report to the front office. She sat stiffly in the waiting chair. The office smelled like old paper and disappointment. Mr. Brody, the assistant principal, came out and motioned her in. He closed the door behind them and took a seat. I got another note from Ms. Peters, he began. You're still refusing to follow instructions in class. I wasn't refusing. I just asked to work ahead. You know the rules. Amara didn't answer. He leaned forward, lacing his fingers. We're trying to help you succeed, Amara. But success starts with respect. That word again. Respect. What did it mean when the people demanding respect never gave it back? He continued, I heard you've been going to some kind of outside program on weekends. She hesitated. Yes. With who? A professor. Ethan Cole. From Harvard. Brody blinked. The word Harvard hung in the air like a strange smell. He tried to hide his surprise, but Amara saw the shift in his eyes. And what exactly are you doing there? Math. What kind of math? She shrugged. Real math. That landed like a slap. Amara, he said, tone tight, don't you think you should focus on the math we're teaching here first? It's too easy, she said, before she could stop herself. I'm not trying to be rude. It feels like I'm suffocating in class. He exhaled. Long tired. Well, you're not at Harvard, Miss Johnson. You're in a public school. With other students. And if you can't learn to work within the system, you'll never get to where you're trying to go. She wanted to scream. But your system isn't built for people like me. Instead, she stared at the floor. You can go, he said finally. We'll be calling your mother. When Amara got home, her mom was waiting, arms crossed. I got a voicemail, she said. From your school. Amara dropped her bag. They think I'm being disrespectful. Her mom narrowed her eyes. Are you? No, a pause. But I don't belong there, Mom. Not anymore. Her mother sat down slowly. Baby. I know you're smart. Smarter than anything I've seen. But you can't just run through life like it's a solo act. You still gotta play by some rules. But the rules are broken. Her mom didn't answer. Because deep down, she agreed. I don't want you burning bridges before you even cross them, Denise said gently. You got a future now. One foot in that Harvard place. But don't trip up with the other foot stuck here. I don't know how to be both. Then learn. That evening, Amara video called Professor Cole. His face popped up, looking tired but calm. Rough day? He asked. She nodded. They think I'm trying to be a problem. You're not. I don't fit. You're not supposed to fit. She looked at him, frustration burning. Then what am I supposed to do? Just keep pretending I'm okay with sitting through baby math while everyone hates me for knowing stuff. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, do you know who Ramanujan was? Yeah. Indian mathematician. Self-taught. Genius. Died young. He used to scribble equations on temple floors because no one gave him paper. He sent letters to mathematicians across the world, people who ignored him. Except one. G.H. Hardy. Amara tilted her head. So Hardy brought him to Cambridge. But Ramanujan still had to fight. Every day. To prove he wasn't just lucky. That he belonged. She leaned back, exhaling. Ethan continued, you're not just here to solve problems, Amara. You're here to outlast the ones trying to stop you. Silence. Then she said softly, it's just hard. He nodded. I know. But the hard part is what makes the story worth telling. That night, she didn't write math problems. She wrote her first letter. Dear future me. I hope you're not still angry. I hope you found a place where you can breathe. Where being smart isn't a crime. Where you can be loud about it, proud about it. I hope you still remember how it felt to be 12 and smart and tired. And I hope you still fight for kids like me. Amara. Saturday morning came with rain. Not a downpour, but the soft, misty kind that clung to your jacket and made the city feel smaller, quieter. Amara sat in the passenger seat of Ethan's car, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her notebook was wedged under her arm like a shield. She stared out the window as they drove through Cambridge, watching the world shift from worn-down blocks to polished glass and brick. Everything looked expensive, even the trees seemed like they belonged to someone important. "You nervous?" Ethan asked gently, turning onto a narrow side street. Amara shrugged. "Not really. But that was a lie." Her heart was thudding like it was doing math of its own. "She's intense," Ethan warned. "But fair. I'm used to intense. Not like this." He pulled into a gated parking lot and pointed. "That's the Newton Foundation. Dr. Camille Hartman runs it. She's one of the top minds in youth-gifted education. She's also a bit scary." Ethan smiled. "Let's say, precise." The building itself was sleek, minimalist design, steel beams, glass everywhere. It didn't feel like a school. It felt like a place where ideas went to grow up. Amara followed Ethan through the lobby and into a second-floor meeting room, where a woman waited behind a large glass table. She was tall, dark-skinned, dressed in navy slacks and a cream blazer, with silver-rimmed glasses and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her presence was so grounded, so assured, that Amara felt immediately off balance, like being measured by a scale too advanced to lie. "Amara," Camille said, standing and offering her hand. "I've heard a lot about you." Amara shook it, her palm slightly damp. "Nice to meet you, ma'am." "No need for ma'am. Dr. Hartman is fine." "Yes, ma'am, I mean, Dr. Hartman." Camille smiled faintly and gestured to the table. On it sat a single sheet of paper. Blank. Beside it, a pencil and a timer. Amara blinked. "What's the test?" Camille folded her hands. "There's no official test today. I just want to see how you think. I'm going to give you one problem. It's open-ended. There may be more than one answer. Or no answer at all." Amara tilted her head, intrigued. "Sounds fun." Camille arched an eyebrow. "That's not usually the reaction I get." "I'm not usual." Ethan smiled quietly in the corner. Camille set the paper in front of her and handed over the pencil. "Here's the prompt," she said. "A bridge is collapsing. You can carry only one thing across safely, a formula, a theorem, or a question. Which do you choose? And why?" Amara blinked. She hadn't expected that. It wasn't a test. It was philosophy. Wrapped in math. It was a riddle for thinkers, not memorizers. She sat back in her chair, staring at the blank page. Camille pressed the timer. "You have 20 minutes. At first, her mind spun in every direction. What kind of question was this? No equations, no variables, just an idea. And yet, something about it felt right. It felt like the kind of math that mattered. The kind that wasn't just about numbers but about meaning. Bridge collapsing. One thing to carry. She tapped the pencil against her chin. A formula might save the structure. A theorem might reveal the fault. But a question? That could change the future. She started writing. 20 minutes later, Camille returned and picked up the sheet. She didn't read it aloud, just scanned silently. Her expression didn't change. But Ethan saw it, the slight lift of her eyebrows, the way her eyes narrowed not in skepticism, but in something close to curiosity. She set the page down and looked at Amara. "You chose a question," she said. Amara nodded. Camille read aloud, "If one bridge falls, how can we build one that won't?" There was a pause. "That's not just a mathematical question," Camille said. "That's a systems question. An engineering question. A human question." Amara stayed quiet, unsure if that was praise or judgment. But Camille smiled, small, but unmistakably real. "You think upstream," she said. "That's rare." Then she turned to Ethan. "She's in." Camille walked them through the Foundation's offerings, weekend programs, mentorships, research support, even summer residencies. If Amara kept up her progress, she could be fully sponsored within the year, travel stipends, competitions, even university-level coursework. "You'll be expected to work," Camille said directly. "Hard. Not just at math, but at discipline, communication, humility. Brilliance isn't enough. You need to survive in rooms that weren't built for you." Amara nodded. "I'm used to that." Camille leaned forward, her tone sharpening. "Don't get used to it. Learn to change the room." Ethan felt goosebumps rise. So did Amara. As they left the building, Amara didn't say much. She was quiet in the car, staring out the window again. But this time, her expression had changed. Less guarded. More ready. Ethan glanced at her. "You okay?" She nodded. Then she said, "That wasn't a test. That was a challenge." He smiled. "Exactly." She looked down at her notebook, flipping through the pages until she found a blank one. And at the top, she wrote, "Change the room." Underneath it, she wrote a problem she hadn't solved yet. But this time, it wasn't for school. It was for herself. The invitation came in a cream-colored envelope, sealed with the Newton Foundation's gold crest. Amara opened it carefully, like it might dissolve in her hands. Inside was a formal letter with her name printed in bold type. Amara Johnson. You are cordially invited to attend the Newton Foundation Fall Scholars Dinner. Hosted at the Harvard Faculty Club. Saturday, 6 p.m. Formal attire required. She read it twice, then a third time, just to be sure. Her hands were shaking by the end. "Mom," she shouted, racing into the living room. "Look." Denise took the letter, squinting. Her eyebrows raised slowly. "Is this fancy?" "It's at Harvard," Amara said, eyes shining. "Like, real Harvard. With other scholars." Denise let out a low whistle. "So, what are you gonna wear?" Amara froze. That night, they hit the Goodwill down the block. Denise scoured the racks like it was a battlefield, pulling jackets, dresses, skirts. None of which felt like Amara. She tried on a blazer that was too wide, then a pencil skirt that scratched her skin. She shifted in the mirror, feeling like a kid playing dress-up at a rich lady's closet. "This ain't me," she muttered. Denise smiled gently. "No, baby, but it's a start. We don't have to pretend, you just have to feel like you belong in the room." Amara hesitated. Then she found it. A navy blue dress, simple, but clean-cut. Just formal enough. She added a second-hand necklace from the clearance bin and a pair of ballet flats that fit almost right. She looked at herself in the mirror. Still her. But sharper. Like a girl on the edge of something. Saturday came fast. Cambridge was lit gold under the early evening sun as Ethan picked her up. He was in a charcoal suit, no tie, his usual casual polish. When Amara climbed in, he blinked. "You clean up nice." She grinned. "So do you, Professor." They reached the faculty club just after 6. The building was all wood-paneled history, portraits on the walls, chandeliers glowing above white linen tables. Waiters in black vests passed hors d'oeuvres she couldn't even pronounce. "Remember," Ethan whispered as they entered, "you're not here to impress anyone. You're here because you earned this." But Amara could feel the stares as soon as she stepped inside. Most of the other scholars were older, high school juniors, seniors. Dressed to the nines. Confident. White, mostly. A few Asian. Maybe one or two other black students, clustered near the back. Amara found herself shrinking, shoulders tensing. Her voice, usually fast and sharp, curled inward. Camille Hartman spotted her from across the room and walked over. "Glad you made it," she said. Her tone was even, but her eyes were warm. "I almost didn't," Amara admitted. "Wasn't sure I had the shoes for it." Camille glanced down, then gave the smallest of nods. "You wore you. That's enough." They sat at a long table with name cards. Amara found hers between a boy named Lucas Abernathy, who barely glanced at her, and a girl named Priya Patel, who smiled but didn't speak. Conversation buzzed like static. Talk of internships. Lab projects. Ivy League acceptances. Terms Amara had only seen online. One student mentioned their summer at MIT's Research Science Institute. Another bragged about meeting a Fields medalist in Zurich. Amara said nothing. Until dessert. That's when one of the donors at the end of the table, a tall man in a blue suit with a watch that probably cost more than her mom's car, leaned over and asked, too casually. "So, Amara, which prep academy are you from?" She blinked. Carter Middle. In Boston." The air changed. A flicker of confusion crossed the man's face. "Public school." Ethan, seated across the table, tensed. "Yes," Amara said simply. The man recovered with a tight smile. "Ah. Diversity initiative. Very admirable." Camille's fork paused mid-air. Amara swallowed hard. "I'm here," she said, "because I scored in the top 1% on 2 assessment exams. And Dr. Hartman said I think upstream." There was silence. Then Camille smiled, broadly, this time. She also led her team in solving a Tier 3 combinatorics problem last week. With elegance. The man coughed. "Well. Impressive." He didn't speak to her again. But that was fine. Because suddenly, the girl on Amara's right, Priya, turned and said quietly, "I go to Boston Latin. It's not exactly Phillips Exeter, either. I think you're brave for showing up." Amara smiled. "Showing up's half the fight." After dinner, Camille pulled Amara aside. "How'd it feel?" she asked. "Like I sat at a table that wasn't set for me. And I brought my own chair." Camille chuckled softly. "That," she said, "is how change begins." That night, Amara wrote in her notebook. "Dear future me. Tonight I sat with people who didn't think I should be there. I spoke anyway. I didn't shrink. I'm still scared sometimes. But I'm learning something stronger than fear. Belonging isn't given. It's claimed." Amara. The classroom was nearly empty when Amara found it. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, one of those gray Boston days where time seemed to blur. She had been at Harvard early for her mentorship session, but Ethan was late. So she wandered. Through the math wing. Down unfamiliar halls. That's when she saw it. Room 2 to 308. Whiteboard walls on 3 sides. A small plaque by the door read, "Experimental Problems Lab, faculty use only." The lights were off. But the door wasn't locked. Amara stepped inside quietly. The room smelled like dry erase ink and chalk dust, like thinking. The tables were cluttered with open notebooks, coffee mugs, and books with titles she couldn't pronounce. But it was the far wall that stopped her cold. Someone had left a problem half-finished on the whiteboard. No explanation. No answer. Just lines of pure logic. Let GGG be a simple graph with vertex set VVV, where divides V divides equals N V equals N divides V divides equals N, find a bound for the Ramsey number R, G, G, R, G, G, R, G, G, in terms of N and N. Amara's eyes went wide. Ramsey theory. She'd read about it. Barely scratched the surface. It was deep math, messy and beautiful. The kind of math that asked, how much chaos can you have before order must emerge? She read the equation again. And again. Something clicked. Ethan found her 30 minutes later, standing in front of the board, scribbling wild solutions in black and red marker. He blinked. How did you get in here? The door was open, she said, not turning around. He stepped closer. You know what you're looking at? Yes. And no. Her handwriting was everywhere now, across 2 full walls. I think it's a trap. Ethan raised an eyebrow. How so? It looks like it's about finding a bound, she said, pacing, but I think it's really about what happens when you can't find one. Like, it's testing how far randomness can stretch before something, anything, has to hold. Ethan watched her. Do you know who left this? She shrugged. No. But it feels like it's waiting. He smiled slowly. This problem came out of a visiting scholar's lecture last year. Nobody's fully solved it yet. Amara stopped. Nobody. Not even close. She looked at the board, then back at Ethan. Can I try? He chuckled. I think you already are. The next week, Amara returned to that room 3 times. She skipped lunch. Stayed after hours. Pored over the problem like it was breathing. Each time, she left behind more notes. More diagrams. Circles, triangles, graphs. Questions on top of questions. Until one day, there was a note taped to the board. Interesting insight. Want to discuss? Professor H. Goldstein. Office 3 to 141. Amara stared at it like it might disappear. Goldstein. The name was familiar. She Googled him in the library that night. Harlan Goldstein, tenured Harvard professor. Known for groundbreaking work in combinatorics and probability. Published more papers than she'd read books. And he wanted to talk to her. The next day, she stood outside his office, heart hammering. Her hands were jammed into the sleeves of her hoodie. Inside, she heard the low murmur of a phone call. She turned to leave. Then the door opened. Amara? He was shorter than she imagined. Gray hair, thick glasses, a cardigan with elbow patches. He looked like someone's tired grandfather, until you caught the fire in his eyes. Yes, sir, she said. Come in. His office was stuffed with books. More than she thought could fit in one room. The shelves looked like they might collapse from knowledge. He sat down and gestured for her to do the same. I saw what you wrote on the board, he said, not wasting time. That recursive graph construction, it's clever. You didn't invent it, but the way you applied it? That's original. She blinked. You read all of it? Every line. Twice. She swallowed. Was it wrong? Goldstein leaned back. Math isn't about wrong. It's about what if. Amara nodded slowly. I want to offer you something, he continued. An informal project. No grades. No pressure. Just exploration. I'll give you access to some of our grad student data sets. You think about how Ramsey principles might apply to social networks. Her heart almost stopped. You want me to work with you? I want to see how you think. If that works out, maybe you present something next spring. Student conference. Or even MIT's youth symposium. She gripped the edges of her chair. I don't know what to say. Start by saying yes. She smiled. Yes. That night, back at home, she opened her notebook and wrote. Dear future me. You touched something today. Something big. Bigger than classrooms. Bigger than people's opinions. You're not just good at this. You're meant for this. The math is starting to speak back. Amara. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small. She felt infinite. It was the kind of night where the air felt heavy, like the sky was holding its breath. The wind howled, pushing rain against the windows, and inside their small apartment, the kitchen light flickered. Denise was standing over the stove, stirring a pot of something that smelled like burnt garlic. Amara's eyes were locked on her phone. Another email from Professor Goldstein about their upcoming project. The math problem, the graphs, the equations, it all felt like a whirlwind of genius. And Amara was in the middle of it, holding the tornado at bay. But the weight on her shoulders wasn't just intellectual. It was emotional. Every time she left for Harvard, every time she worked late at the library, there was something missing when she came back. Something in her mother's eyes that made Amara feel like she was fading away. "Mom," she said softly, putting down her phone. "I got invited to that youth symposium next spring. Professor Goldstein thinks I can present my work there." Denise didn't look up. "That's great, honey. I'm so proud of you." Amara hesitated. But there was always a but. "You've been gone a lot," Denise said, finally turning to face her. Her face was drawn, tired. The lines around her eyes were deeper than Amara remembered. "You're changing, Amara. And I'm not sure who you're becoming anymore." Amara's stomach tightened. "What do you mean? You barely come home for dinner anymore. You spend more time with them, those professors and students, than you do with me. This isn't just about math, Amara. This is about you running away from us." Amara stepped back, her heart hammering. "Running away? Mom, I'm not running away. I'm doing something important. For me." Denise's eyes softened, but there was still pain there. "I get it. I do. But you can't leave me behind. I don't even know who I'm supposed to be when you're gone. I gave up so much for you to be here. For you to get this chance. I know that." Amara's voice cracked. "But I need to do this. I need to show everyone that I'm more than what they think I am. That I can do something big. You are big to me, Amara. But you're not the only one who's struggling here. You're not the only one who sacrificed everything." The silence between them stretched. The tension in the room became unbearable, as though the walls were closing in. Amara opened her mouth to respond, but she couldn't find the words. There was nothing she could say to make this right. She was running out of time, out of explanations. She grabbed her coat from the back of the chair. "I'm going to the library," she muttered, before heading for the door. Denise called after her, but Amara didn't look back. Amara spent hours in the library that night, far longer than she should have. But the math, it was the one thing she could control. The one thing that didn't ask for explanations. That didn't judge. She kept working through the Ramsey problem, but the equations blurred before her eyes. She couldn't concentrate. All she could think about was what her mom had said. What if she was right? The problem wasn't just her success. It was how much of it she had to leave behind to get there. The life she was carving out for herself at Harvard was starting to feel like a different world, one where the people she loved were becoming distant stars she could barely reach. She closed her laptop with a frustrated snap. When Amara walked back through the door that night, her mother was sitting at the kitchen table, a half-eaten bowl of soup in front of her. "Mom?" Amara asked quietly. Denise didn't look up. "I'll be in bed in a minute." Amara lingered in the doorway. "I don't want to leave. But I don't know how to be here anymore." Denise's shoulders slumped. "I don't want to hold you back. But I can't just watch you disappear, Amara." Amara stepped forward, sinking into the chair across from her mother. "I'm not disappearing. I just don't know how to balance everything. You've sacrificed so much for me to get here, and now it feels like the only thing I can focus on is math. I don't know what that makes me." Denise reached out and took Amara's hand. "It makes you my daughter. The same daughter who used to sit on my lap and talk about dreams. You're allowed to dream, honey. But just don't forget who you are along the way." Amara squeezed her mother's hand tightly. "I won't forget." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm scared, Mom. I'm scared that if I don't keep moving, I'll lose everything." "You won't lose me, baby." Denise smiled, but it was a sad smile. "You'll always be my little girl. Even if you do change. Even if you grow up." That night, Amara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the rain outside tapping at the window. Her heart was a whirlwind of confusion, and in her mind, the math began to blur with the words her mom had said. She had always dreamed of leaving, of escaping the confines of her small world. But now that she was here, in this new world, the one she had worked so hard to build, she realized something important. You could grow. But you couldn't grow alone. She wasn't sure how to bridge the gap between her past and her future, but she knew one thing. She wasn't ready to leave behind the people who loved her. She just had to find a way to bring them with her. The sound of her phone buzzing woke Amara up. She groggily reached for it on her bedside table, squinting at the screen. It was just after 8 a.m., and the message was from Professor Goldstein. "Amara, let's meet today at 3 p.m. I think we've reached a breakthrough on your approach to the problem. I'm impressed. Let's discuss." Amara's heart raced. This was what she had been working for, the moment she'd been pushing toward. Goldstein had never been so direct, so enthusiastic about her work. The youth symposium was within reach. This could be the beginning of something massive. But as she sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes, she heard the soft creak of the kitchen door opening. Denise entered the room, her tired eyes immediately locking with Amara's. "I made coffee. Thought we could talk before you head out." Amara felt the weight of the last few days pressing on her chest again. The fight, the silence, the unspoken tension that had grown between them ever since her success started to separate her from home. It was like the ground beneath her feet had split, and now she had to choose which side to stand on. "I'm meeting with Professor Goldstein at 3 p.m., Amara said quietly, her voice thick with the complexity of her emotions. "It's about the symposium. This could be huge, Mom." Denise's gaze faltered for a moment, then she sighed, sitting at the edge of Amara's bed. I know how much this means to you. But what about us, Amara? What about me?" Amara swallowed, suddenly feeling the gap that had formed between them. "You know how much I care. This is just the next step. I've worked my whole life for this." Denise's voice trembled. "I get it. But I've spent years being there for you. And I'm proud of what you've accomplished. But now you're so far away from me, emotionally. It's like you've already left, and I'm stuck here watching." Amara felt a knot form in her throat. She hated seeing her mother like this, hated that her success was causing so much pain. "I don't want to hurt you, Mom," Amara said softly, her voice breaking. "But I can't turn my back on this opportunity. I can't walk away from what I've worked for." Denise's eyes filled with tears, and she wiped them quickly. "I don't want you to walk away from your dreams. I just don't want to be forgotten in the process." Amara's heart ached. "I'm not going to forget you. But I need to do this. For me. I've always been the girl you believed in. Don't you want me to show the world who I really am?" Denise fell silent, her shoulders sagging. The weight of the conversation felt suffocating, but Amara couldn't bring herself to walk away from this moment. She knew that she couldn't keep running from the tension between them, but neither could she ignore the dreams she had set in motion at Harvard. I just need to figure out how to be both of those things, Mom. A daughter and a student. I'm not sure how to balance it. Her mother gave a sad, understanding smile. I know, baby. I know. And I don't expect you to have all the answers right now. But just remember, I'm always here for you. Even if you can't see it. The rest of the day was a blur for Amara. She couldn't stop thinking about the weight of the choice ahead of her. The emails, the equations, the late nights, those things were within her grasp, just a little more effort away from becoming her reality. But then, there was Denise, her mother, who had always been the anchor in her life. At 2:45 p.m., Amara grabbed her bag and headed to the campus office, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. As she stepped into Professor Goldstein's office, his familiar chalky scent mixed with the stale coffee smell in the air, but the moment she saw the whiteboard, she was reminded of why she was here. Goldstein stood by the whiteboard, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on a series of numbers and symbols. When he saw her, his face softened. "I'm glad you could make it," he said. "I think we're finally starting to make some sense of the problem." Amara nodded, but the excitement she once felt seemed to have evaporated. She could barely focus on the equations. Her mind kept wandering back to the conversation with her mother, the quiet plea in her voice, the way it felt like something was slipping through her fingers. Goldstein noticed the hesitation in her posture. "You okay?" Amara took a deep breath. "I'm fine, just distracted. This is important, but..." "Amara." Goldstein's voice was firm now. "If there's something on your mind, I need you to be present. Focus. We can't do this halfway." The word stung. He was right. She couldn't do this halfway. Not for him. Not for anyone. But how could she? "I'm not sure I can do both anymore," Amara said, her voice low. "My family, they need me. But this project. It's everything I've worked for." Goldstein studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing. "Let me tell you something about opportunities, Amara. They don't come around often. You don't know what the future holds, but if you walk away now, will you regret it later?" Amara didn't answer right away. She thought about her mother's words. She thought about the girl she had once been, dreaming of a future that felt so distant, and now, that future was in her hands. "I need to think," she said finally, feeling a tightness in her chest. "I'm not sure I can decide right now." Goldstein gave a slight nod. "Take your time. But remember, sometimes in life, you have to make the hard choice. The one that pushes you to become who you're meant to be." The rest of the evening passed in a haze for Amara. She couldn't bring herself to focus on anything, her mother's words, Professor Goldstein's encouragement, the equations on the board. She couldn't stop thinking about the storm that was brewing in her own heart, torn between two worlds she couldn't quite reconcile. By the time she got back to the apartment, Denise was already in bed, the soft glow of her bedside lamp the only light in the room. Amara sat at the foot of her mother's bed, quietly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Denise stirred, her eyes opening slowly. She smiled faintly. "It's okay, Amara. You're growing up. I knew this day would come." Amara's voice cracked. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," Denise whispered. "But you have to live your life, too. I'll be here. Always." Amara nodded, the tears threatening to spill. She didn't have all the answers. But she was learning to trust herself more. To trust that, even in the hardest choices, love would still find a way to hold them together. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension. Amara's mind was torn between two worlds, both calling to her, both pulling her in different directions. Her mother's soft words haunted her, "I'll be here. Always." And yet, every time Amara saw Denise's weary eyes, every time she felt the distance grow between them, it became harder to ignore the reality of what she was sacrificing. She woke up early that Thursday morning, the sun barely rising, casting long shadows across her room. Amara sat up, brushing her hand through her hair, trying to steady her breathing. The moment the alarm had gone off, she had known the decision she would have to make that day. But the weight of it was suffocating. She had received another email from Professor Goldstein earlier, reminding her of the upcoming youth symposium and the tight deadline for submissions. The clock was ticking. But when she looked at her phone, the text message from her mom was waiting, one that she hadn't read until now. "I don't want to hold you back, Amara. But I miss you. Come home this weekend. I need to talk to you." "We both do." Amara felt the lump form in her throat. The invitation was simple, but the emotions it carried were not. Her mom wanted her to come home, to spend time together, to talk. But what about the symposium? What about the future? The weight of ambition she had been chasing since she was a child had become a constant pressure on her chest. She sighed, setting her phone down. She had made promises to herself, to Harvard, to Goldstein. She had worked so hard to get here, to be the first to break down barriers, to prove that she was more than the odds stacked against her. But in her pursuit of success, she had overlooked something just as important, the people who had helped her get there. Her mother, the one who had sacrificed so much, was now asking for her attention. Her fingers hovered over the phone screen. She had a million thoughts, but no answers. What was she supposed to do? Amara knew her ambition was important, but so was her family. They had given up so much for her to be where she was. Her mom had stayed up late, working double shifts to keep food on the table, all while encouraging Amara to follow her dreams. Now, Amara was at a crossroads. Could she keep pursuing this dream, or was it time to go back, to remember the things she almost forgot? Her thoughts were interrupted by the familiar sound of a knock on her door. She didn't need to ask who it was. She could feel the presence of her roommate, Lisa, standing on the other side. "Hey, you up?" Lisa's voice came through the door. Amara opened it, finding her roommate standing with a mug of coffee in hand. She handed it to Amara without a word, her eyes searching her face for some kind of clue. "You've been quiet," Lisa said, stepping into the room. "Everything okay?" Amara took the mug, letting the warmth seep through her fingers. She smiled weakly. "Yeah, just thinking." Lisa sat down on the bed, crossing her legs beneath her. "I've never seen you this distracted before. What's going on?" Amara hesitated, staring at the floor. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For a moment, she wasn't sure how to explain the mess in her head. But Lisa, as always, was patient. "I think I've got to make a choice," Amara said quietly. "Between my future at Harvard and my family. Between what I've always dreamed of and what's in front of me now." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "What's in front of you now?" "My mom," Amara replied, her voice thick. "She's asking me to come home this weekend. She says she misses me, and I think she needs me." "I get it," Lisa said softly. "But you've worked so hard for this. You can't just put it all on hold, Amara. It's not about choosing one or the other. You're allowed to grow, to have your own life." Amara took a sip of the coffee, feeling the bitterness mix with the overwhelming sense of guilt in her chest. "I know. But I don't know if I can keep going like this. I'm here, but it feels like a part of me is still back home. And my mom, she's not getting any younger. I can't keep ignoring her needs just because I'm chasing something that may not even work out." Lisa placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently. "You don't have to do this alone, Amara. It's okay to be torn. Just remember that it's okay to take a step back sometimes. That doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're learning how to balance it all." The words settled into Amara's mind, but they didn't bring clarity. They only made her more aware of how much she had left unresolved. Later that afternoon, Amara found herself standing in front of the mirror in the campus bathroom. She stared at her reflection, her expression a mixture of determination and fear. It was hard to reconcile the girl she was with the woman she was becoming. She had always known that ambition came with sacrifice, but she hadn't realized just how much. She had already decided, she would go home for the weekend. Her mom needed her. But the question that lingered in her mind was this: was she ready to let go of the chance to prove herself, to let go of the dream that had consumed so much of her? She needed space to think. And the only way to do that was to step back from the suffocating pressure of Harvard, if only for a few days. The decision was made. But even as she gathered her things to leave the dorm, a familiar feeling lingered in the pit of her stomach. The fear of the unknown. The fear of regret. But more than that, she realized something important. Success didn't have to mean leaving everything behind. It didn't have to be a choice between family and ambition. The path forward wasn't about sacrifice, it was about finding a way to have both. To grow, but to remember where you came from. She took a deep breath. She wasn't walking away from her dreams. But she wasn't walking away from her family either. That weekend, as Amara sat beside her mother, the weight on her shoulders seemed to ease just a little. They didn't talk about math. They didn't talk about Harvard or equations or symposiums. They just sat together, and in that silence, Amara realized that the future wasn't something to run toward, it was something she had to build, carefully, with the people who mattered most. When she returned to Harvard a few days later, the drive inside her was stronger than ever. She had learned something invaluable, that her ambition could coexist with her love for family. And now, she was ready to balance both. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Amara had always known that success wasn't easy. It never was. But after that weekend, something inside her clicked. The time away from the relentless pressure of Harvard had given her a fresh perspective, a chance to breathe. Her mother had reminded her of the strength of their bond, and she realized that this wasn't a race she had to win alone. She could find balance, not by splitting her worlds apart, but by weaving them together. When she returned to campus, she felt lighter, not because her problems had disappeared, but because she had learned how to carry them. She had made peace with the idea that success and family didn't have to be at odds. The next day, Amara walked into the math department with a different kind of energy, focused but grounded. Her mind was sharper, clearer than it had been in weeks. The equations, which had once seemed overwhelming and insurmountable, were now puzzles waiting to be solved. She was ready to dive back in. Professor Goldstein had been emailing her about their next steps for the youth symposium. The pressure was mounting. Time was running out. But Amara wasn't worried. For the first time in weeks, she felt in control. That afternoon, she found herself sitting at the familiar table in the math lab, her laptop open in front of her. Her papers were scattered across the table, covered with a mix of notes, scribbles, and half-formed ideas. She had been working on a particularly difficult problem for the past few weeks, something that Goldstein had described as a game-changer, if she could crack it. But every time she thought she was close, the solution slipped through her fingers. Today, though, it felt different. She stared at the screen, the equations in front of her seeming almost familiar, like a language she was just beginning to understand. She glanced over at the clock. It was nearly 4 p.m. She had an hour before her meeting with Goldstein. She knew she needed a breakthrough. She leaned forward, her fingers flying over the keyboard, typing out calculations and manipulating variables. She adjusted the variables, ran a quick analysis, then paused, her eyes scanning the equations. It was then that something clicked, an unexpected connection between two seemingly unrelated concepts. Amara's pulse quickened as she quickly rechecked her work. Could this be it? She pulled up another set of calculations. The numbers aligned perfectly, the variables falling into place. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and for the first time, she could see the entire problem clearly. She'd cracked it. She had found the missing link. Her heart raced, and she felt a surge of adrenaline. She quickly printed out her work and gathered the papers, eager to meet with Goldstein. She couldn't wait to show him what she had discovered. When Amara arrived at Goldstein's office later that day, she was buzzing with excitement. She knocked on the door before stepping inside, her heart beating in her chest. Goldstein was sitting behind his desk, reviewing some notes. When he saw her, he motioned for her to come in. "Amara," he said, looking up. "Glad you could make it. I've been going through your latest notes. They're promising." "Professor, I think I've found it," Amara said, her voice barely containing the excitement. She placed the printed papers on his desk and leaned forward. "I think I've cracked the problem." Goldstein raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Really? Show me." Amara quickly went through her calculations, pointing out the key variables she had uncovered, and explaining how they fit together in a way that had eluded her before. Goldstein listened intently, his expression changing from curiosity to genuine surprise as he followed her explanation. This is brilliant," Goldstein said after a long pause. "Amara, you've done it. You've actually done it." A rush of pride surged through her. "You really think so?" Goldstein leaned back in his chair, folding his hands in front of him. "Amara, this isn't just good work, it's exceptional. What you've done here has the potential to change how we approach this entire problem. You've identified something no one else has been able to." Amara felt a grin spread across her face. The weight that had been pressing on her chest for so long seemed to lift. This was it. The breakthrough. The moment she had worked so hard for. But there was something else in Goldstein's eyes, something that Amara hadn't seen before. A mix of admiration and something else, something deeper. This could be huge," Amara repeated, her voice trembling slightly. "What do we do next?" Goldstein's smile faded a little as he looked at her with a more serious expression. "Next. We present it at the symposium, of course. But Amara, I need you to understand something. This kind of discovery isn't just about solving an equation. It's about the impact it could have. The world is going to notice. You have to be ready for that." Amara nodded, the weight of his words settling over her. She had known that this could change everything, but hearing it from Goldstein made it feel real. She wasn't just doing this for herself anymore. She was doing it for something bigger. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady now, filled with purpose. Goldstein nodded. "Good. Because once you make this discovery public, there's no going back. You're going to be in the spotlight, Amara. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Amara didn't hesitate. "I've been ready for this my whole life." As she left Goldstein's office later that day, Amara couldn't stop smiling. She had done it. She had made the breakthrough she had worked for, and it was all within her grasp now. The symposium was just around the corner, and soon the world would know her name. But as she walked back to her dorm, her phone buzzed with a message from her mom. "I'm proud of you, Amara. No matter what happens next, remember that I'm always here." Amara's heart swelled. She wasn't alone in this. No matter how much the world changed, no matter how far her ambitions took her, she would always have the love and support of the one person who had believed in her from the start. And in that moment, as the city of Cambridge spread out before her, Amara knew that this wasn't just her breakthrough, it was theirs, too. The days leading up to the youth symposium felt like a blur. The moment Amara's discovery had been validated by Professor Goldstein, the gears of her life shifted. No longer was she just a student working through complex equations in the quiet corners of Harvard's math department. She was someone who had cracked a monumental problem, and now, she was about to stand on a stage, sharing her findings with the world. For the first time, she felt the weight of her ambition, more palpable, more immediate. Her work had gone from personal triumph to public responsibility, and that made everything feel heavier. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from professors, colleagues, and fellow students congratulating her, eager to meet her or ask about her research. Each time she looked at the screen, the message was the same: "Congratulations, Amara. You've done something incredible. Everyone's talking about you." It should have felt good, and in many ways, it did. But there was also a growing sense of unease that Amara couldn't quite shake. She had always dreamed of this moment, but now that it was here, she was beginning to understand the true cost of success. As the day of the symposium neared, the spotlight that once seemed so far away now felt blinding. It was no longer about the math. It was no longer about just solving the problem. It was about Amara, the girl who had done the impossible, the one who had overcome so much, the one who had to stand tall and represent an entire future. It was exhilarating. And terrifying. The morning of the symposium, Amara woke up with a tight knot in her stomach. The air outside was crisp, the fall leaves rustling gently in the breeze. It felt like any other day, but it wasn't. Today, she would present her breakthrough to a room full of some of the brightest minds in academia. It was a big deal. A very big deal. She had spent the entire night rehearsing her presentation, pacing back and forth in her dorm room. Her notes were perfectly organized, her slides were sleek, and her speech was rehearsed. But the nerves were still there. They hadn't faded. She checked her phone one last time, scrolling through the endless messages of congratulations and words of encouragement. There was one from Denise. "You've got this, Amara. I believe in you. I'm so proud of you. Go make history today." Amara smiled softly, her heart swelling. She needed to remember why she started this journey in the first place. It wasn't for the accolades, the fame, or the recognition. It was for moments like this, when she could take the lessons her mother had taught her, her own sacrifices, and show the world that she was capable of greatness. With a deep breath, Amara gathered her materials and left her dorm room. As she walked across the campus toward the lecture hall, the world around her seemed to slow down. The chatter of students faded into the background, and all she could hear was the steady beat of her own heart, louder and louder in her chest. The lecture hall was large, filled with rows of empty seats, but Amara's nerves only seemed to grow as she stepped inside. The stage was set. The podium stood at the front of the room, the large screen behind it ready to display her slides. The walls were lined with photographs of past symposiums, each capturing brilliant young minds who had stood in the very spot she was about to occupy. Her stomach twisted. This is real now. She was so caught up in her nerves that she didn't notice Professor Goldstein entering behind her until he clapped a hand on her shoulder. "Amara," he said, his voice calm and steady. "You're going to do great." She turned to him, offering a weak smile. "Thanks, Professor. I'm just a little nervous." Goldstein chuckled. "That's normal. Nerves mean you care. But I've seen you work, Amara. You've got this." Amara nodded, trying to take comfort in his words, but the weight of the situation was still there. She felt eyes on her, imaginary eyes, the weight of all the expectations. The other presenters began to trickle in, each one focused, each one looking confident in their own way. Amara didn't know what it was about this moment that made everything feel so daunting. She had stood in front of crowds before, presented her ideas, but this was different. This time, it wasn't just her research being showcased. It was her intellect, her future, her identity. Minutes before she was called to the stage, Professor Goldstein found her again. This time, his eyes were softer, almost like a father's. "I know you're nervous. But just remember, you've earned this. And no matter what happens, this is your moment. Don't let anyone take it from you." Amara took a deep breath, nodding as she tried to absorb his words. "Thanks, Professor. I won't let you down." Goldstein smiled warmly. I know you won't. The moment came. Amara's name was called. She stood and walked to the podium, every step feeling like it echoed through the hall. As she adjusted the microphone, she felt the weight of every eye in the room focused on her. She took one last deep breath, steadying herself. The room fell into silence. Good afternoon, everyone, she began, her voice louder than she expected, but steady. My name is Amara Johnson, and today, I'm going to share with you my recent work on breaking through a particularly complex mathematical problem involving advanced equations. It's a breakthrough I'm very excited about, and I believe it holds the potential to change how we approach this issue moving forward. She launched into her presentation, explaining the equations, the variables, and the connections she had uncovered. With every word, the nerves began to fade. Her passion for the subject, her love for what she did, took over. She was no longer worried about the eyes on her. She was just a student sharing something she had worked tirelessly to solve. But as she continued, she couldn't shake the feeling that something else was happening. The room was reacting. The professors and experts in the audience were leaning forward, nodding, and taking notes. They were engaged, really engaged. When Amara finished, there was a long silence. She glanced up at the audience, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, slowly, one by one, the audience began to clap. At first, it was hesitant, but soon, the applause grew. It wasn't thunderous, but it was enough to fill her with warmth. The moment she had been dreading, the moment she had feared would expose her doubts and insecurities, had turned into a victory. Professor Goldstein was the first to stand, his hands clapping with genuine pride. The others followed suit. Amara's eyes filled with tears. She had done it. She had stood in front of this room, shared her work, and earned their respect. In that moment, she realized that this wasn't just about the breakthrough, it was about the journey, the battles she had fought, and the person she had become. As the applause died down, Amara stood tall, her heart full. The spotlight had never felt so warm. The applause from the symposium had barely faded when Amara's life began to change in ways she hadn't anticipated. The spotlight, which had once seemed like a distant dream, was now uncomfortably close. She had expected it to feel empowering, and in many ways, it did. But there was a price to be paid, a price that Amara hadn't fully prepared for. The first few days after the symposium felt like a whirlwind. News outlets picked up her story, and soon she was being interviewed for various media platforms. Professors and mathematicians she had admired from afar were reaching out to praise her work. Even fellow students began treating her differently, with a mix of awe, respect, and envy. It was thrilling at first. Amara felt a sense of validation she had longed for, validation for all the nights spent in the library, for the years spent fighting for a seat at the table. But slowly, the weight of it all began to sink in. She started receiving messages on social media from strangers, some of them congratulatory, some of them questioning her methods. People had started analyzing her work online, picking apart her equations, suggesting alternatives. For every positive message, there was a critical one, and for every congratulation, there was a harsh reminder of how high the stakes were. One afternoon, as Amara scrolled through her phone in her dorm room, she paused on a message from a stranger. Impressive work, but I found a flaw in your theory. You didn't account for X in your calculations. You're going to look foolish when someone else proves you wrong. It was jarring. She tried to shake it off. She had to. But a small part of her felt the sting. The reality was, in the world of academia, one mistake could undo everything. One flaw in her theory, one misstep, and all the hard work, all the late nights, could be forgotten. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. This one was from Denise. Amara, what's going on? I haven't heard from you in a while. You okay? Amara stared at the screen, torn between responding and closing the app altogether. She hadn't realized just how much she'd been avoiding her friends. Avoiding Denise. The pressure of her newfound fame was isolating, and she didn't know how to explain it. She didn't want to sound ungrateful, but the constant attention, the unrelenting expectations, it was exhausting. She typed a quick response. "I'm fine. Just busy with work. I'll catch up soon." She hit send, but the words felt empty. She wasn't fine. She didn't know how to explain it, but she wasn't fine at all. The next few days were a blur of meetings and interviews. Professor Goldstein had encouraged her to speak at conferences, to meet with experts, to embrace the attention. "This is your moment," he had said. "Make the most of it." But Amara was beginning to feel like she was losing control. She was no longer in charge of her time. Every moment was planned for her: interviews, meetings, presentations. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a quiet evening to herself. It was a Saturday when the exhaustion truly hit. Amara had just finished a meeting with a group of academics from a prestigious university who were eager to collaborate with her. The conversation had been exciting, but as soon as she stepped out of the meeting room, she felt like she couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in. She walked down the hallway of the math department, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. She was alone, and for the first time in weeks, she felt utterly lost. There was no one here to tell her to slow down, to remind her of who she was before all of this. She was just a name now, a name attached to an equation that had made headlines, but she was starting to feel like she was disappearing in the process. She picked up her phone again, scrolling through her messages. Denise had reached out again. "Amara, we need to talk. I'm really worried about you." Amara paused. This time, she didn't close the app. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her own isolation. She wanted to respond, to tell Denise everything, but she didn't know how. How could she explain to her best friend that the thing she had wanted most, recognition, success, was now suffocating her? She put the phone down on the table in front of her and looked out the window. The sky was overcast, clouds rolling in, signaling the arrival of a storm. She felt a sense of foreboding in her chest, as if the storm wasn't just outside, it was inside her too. The next week, Amara was invited to a dinner with a few prominent figures in the academic world. The event was exclusive, filled with professors, researchers, and potential future collaborators. Goldstein had encouraged her to attend, telling her it would be an excellent opportunity for networking and building her career. But when Amara arrived at the event, she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong. She was greeted with polite smiles and firm handshakes, but there was an underlying sense of distance between her and everyone else. She was the young prodigy, the one who had done something extraordinary, but she wasn't one of them. She felt like an outsider, a token, a symbol of potential but not a peer. She found herself standing alone in a corner, sipping on a glass of wine, watching the conversation swirl around her. There was talk of grant funding, collaborations, and the future of mathematics, but Amara couldn't find a way to join in. It was like they were speaking a language she didn't know, one that didn't include her. She excused herself to the bathroom, needing a moment of reprieve. As she stared at her reflection in the mirror, she felt a pang of uncertainty. She had fought so hard to get here, to prove herself, but now that she had arrived, she wasn't sure she liked what she had become. Her phone buzzed again. It was Denise. "Amara, I'm coming to visit you this weekend. You need a break." Amara smiled softly at the message. Maybe she did need a break. Maybe she needed someone who saw her for who she really was, not for the accolades or the achievements. For the first time in days, Amara felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the answer wasn't in the accolades, the recognition, or the pressure of living up to other people's expectations. Maybe the answer was in reconnecting with the things that had always mattered most: her family, her friends, and the girl who loved math for the joy of discovery, not the fame it could bring. That night, after the dinner ended, Amara lay in bed, the city lights casting a soft glow through the window. She closed her eyes, trying to quiet her mind, and thought of her mother, of Denise, of the quiet moments that had once defined her life. Tomorrow, she would talk to Denise. Tomorrow, she would find a way to reconnect with herself. She didn't know what the future held, but she was beginning to understand that the price of success wasn't always worth the cost if you lost yourself along the way. For now, though, Amara allowed herself one last quiet moment before the storm. Amara woke up to the soft hum of her phone vibrating against the bedside table. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with thoughts of the dinner, the pressure, the expectations. The spotlight that had once felt exhilarating now felt heavy, as if it were a weight on her chest. The relentless demands, the constant evaluations, she didn't know how much more she could handle. Her phone screen lit up with a message from Denise. "I'm on my way. Be there in a couple of hours. We're going to make this weekend about you, Amara. Just you." Amara smiled for the first time in days. The warmth in Denise's words felt like a lifeline, pulling her away from the sea of expectations that had nearly drowned her. She had spent so much time trying to live up to everyone else's vision of who she should be that she had almost forgotten who she truly was, before all the fame, before the equations, before the breakthrough. She needed this. She needed a break. When Denise arrived, Amara was waiting outside, a little hesitant but also eager for the comfort of her best friend. Denise, with her ever-present energy, stepped out of the car and pulled Amara into a hug. "Girl," Denise said, pulling back to look her up and down, "you look like you've been running a marathon in slow motion. What happened to the Amara who was all smiles and jokes? The one who could laugh at her problems instead of letting them swallow her whole?" Amara let out a soft laugh, the kind that felt like a release. "I don't know, Dee. I don't even recognize myself right now." "Yeah, I could tell. But that's why I'm here," Denise said, slinging an arm around her shoulder. "We're going to get you back to that place. No more pretending to be perfect, no more hiding behind that mask. Just, you. The real you." Amara nodded, grateful for Denise's presence. They spent the next few hours just talking, walking around Harvard Yard, reminiscing about old times. It felt like the world had slowed down, like they had stepped back into a simpler life, where equations were just puzzles to solve, not the source of all her stress. They stopped for coffee at a small cafe in Harvard Square. The familiar smell of roasted beans, the chatter of students studying at nearby tables, it all grounded Amara in a way nothing else had in weeks. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe. "So, spill," Denise said after they sat down with their drinks. "What's really going on, Amara? I know you. You're not just fine." Amara sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know where to start, Dee. Everything's moving so fast. I got this recognition for my work, something I never imagined would happen. But now, it's like I don't know what to do with all of it. I'm not just a student anymore. People want me to be something more. They want answers, collaborations, future projects. But I can't keep up with it. I feel like I'm losing myself in the process." Denise's expression softened. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on Amara's. "Amara, I know how hard you work. I know how much you care about your research. But you have to remember why you started doing this in the first place. It wasn't to impress anyone. It wasn't to be some genius everyone can look up to. It was because you loved the work. You loved math, and you loved solving problems, finding solutions." Amara nodded, but the words still felt like they were just out of her reach, like they didn't fully sink in. "I've lost that, Dee, somewhere along the way. I forgot why I even started this journey. I'm not enjoying it anymore. I feel like I'm just performing for everyone else." Denise reached across the table, grabbing Amara's hand. "You've done something incredible, Amara. No one can take that away from you. But it's okay to step back. You don't owe anyone anything. Not your time, not your energy, and definitely not your happiness. Amara felt a lump form in her throat. Denise's words hit her harder than she expected. She had been so focused on proving herself, on meeting expectations, that she had lost sight of the one thing that truly mattered, her own joy. "I miss it," Amara whispered, her voice breaking. "I miss the feeling of solving an equation just because it excites me. I miss the quiet moments when math was just beautiful, not a burden." Denise smiled softly. "Then let's find that joy again. We'll take it slow. No deadlines. No interviews. Just you, me, and some math. The way it's supposed to be." For the first time in weeks, Amara felt a sense of relief wash over her. She didn't have to live up to anyone's expectations. She didn't have to be the perfect student or the next big thing in mathematics. She could just be herself. The rest of the weekend was a much-needed escape. Amara and Denise spent hours exploring Cambridge, talking about everything and nothing. They went to their favorite diner, where they had spent countless hours during their freshman year, and laughed about old memories. Denise even managed to drag Amara to a nearby park, where they lay on the grass, staring up at the sky, just talking about life. It was during these quiet moments that Amara began to realize something. The pressure that had been building inside her, the expectation to constantly perform, wasn't coming from the outside world. It was coming from within her. She had allowed the accolades, the attention, and the recognition to define her. But now, in the calm of this weekend, she was starting to see the truth. She wasn't just her breakthrough. She wasn't just the girl who had solved an equation. She was Amara. And that was enough. When Monday came, Amara felt different. Lighter, somehow. She returned to her work with a renewed sense of purpose. She still cared about her research, but she wasn't going to let it consume her. She wasn't going to let the pressure of others' expectations dictate her worth. That afternoon, she received a message from Professor Goldstein. "Amara, I'm proud of the work you've done. But I also want to remind you that you're allowed to take a break. Don't lose yourself in all of this. Remember, it's the journey that matters, not the destination." Amara smiled as she read the message. She knew he was right. The journey was hers to define. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was taking control of her own path again. As she sat down at her desk, the papers scattered in front of her didn't feel like a mountain to climb. They were just problems to solve. Beautiful, complex, and challenging. And for the first time in a while, Amara was ready to face them, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The world may have been watching, but she wasn't going to let it dictate her every move. She would take it one step at a time, reconnecting with the passion that had once driven her, passion for math, for discovery, for herself. And maybe, just maybe, that was all she needed to find peace again. Amara had just finished a long day of research, the kind of day where she felt like she'd cracked a puzzle wide open, but still had so much more to figure out. Her mind was buzzing with excitement, and for the first time in weeks, she felt fully engaged in her work. It was a nice change from the chaos of the past few months. The pressure of fame had faded a bit, and now, she was finding her rhythm again, just her, the math, and the quiet satisfaction of solving problems she once thought unsolvable. As she packed up her things to head home, she noticed an envelope on her desk. It was pristine, with her name written in elegant script. She hadn't been expecting any mail, especially not one with such an official look to it. Her curiosity piqued, she opened the envelope and pulled out the letter inside. "Dear Ms. Amara Cole. On behalf of the Math Institute of Excellence, it is with great pleasure that we extend an invitation to you for a prestigious collaboration and conference this summer in Paris. Your recent work in solving complex mathematical equations has caught the attention of our team, and we believe your research could greatly contribute to our upcoming symposium on advanced mathematical theory. The event will bring together some of the brightest minds in the field, and we would be honored to have you present your findings as part of a panel discussion. In addition, we offer you the opportunity to collaborate with our top researchers on ongoing projects that align with your interests. We understand that this may be a significant commitment, but we believe your insights would be invaluable to the global scientific community. Please let us know if you are interested in joining us at this event. We look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely, Dr. Samuel Barlow, Director, Math Institute of Excellence. Amara read the letter twice. Paris. An invitation to collaborate with some of the top minds in mathematics. This was what she had dreamed of, what she had worked for. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, one that many mathematicians would never receive, and yet, as she sat there staring at the letter, she didn't feel the rush of excitement that she thought she would. Instead, a small knot formed in her stomach. Paris, huh? She murmured to herself. She wanted to say yes. She knew how big this was. But something about it felt different now. Her life had become a whirlwind of opportunities, each one bigger than the last. But with every opportunity came more pressure, more expectations. She had fought so hard to get here, to prove herself, but now that she was here, she wondered if the relentless push for success had stripped away the joy of discovery, the very thing that had first drawn her to math. Her mind wandered back to the weekend she'd spent with Denise. How she had reconnected with the simple love of math, of problem-solving for its own sake. She remembered the quiet satisfaction of just working through an equation for the pure thrill of it. Did this invitation represent that same passion, or was it just another step in a game she wasn't sure she wanted to play anymore? Amara, you know you have to say yes, she whispered to herself. It was the logical choice. It was Paris, for goodness sake. A room full of brilliant mathematicians eager to collaborate with her. This could change everything, her career, her future. But then, a different voice, quieter but stronger, cut through her thoughts. It was the voice of the girl who had fallen in love with math for the pure joy of it. The girl who solved problems because it was fun, not because it would make her famous or respected. She grabbed her phone and texted Denise. I just got an invitation to a math symposium in Paris. It's huge. But I don't know if I'm ready for more of this spotlight. It feels like I'm constantly being pulled in different directions. What do you think? Denise replied almost immediately. I think you should do whatever makes you feel like yourself, Amara. If it's Paris, great. But don't let it just be about the next big thing. Remember what you love about math. Is it still there? If yes, go. If not, then maybe it's time to take a step back and find that love again. Amara read the message several times. She had never expected Denise to give her such a simple yet profound answer. But it made sense. This wasn't about the next big achievement. It was about finding her place in the world, not for the accolades or the recognition, but because it was what she truly wanted. She looked out of the window, the city stretching before her. She had always wanted to travel, to experience the world beyond the confines of her textbooks and equations. And Paris, with its rich history of mathematics, would be the perfect place to explore new ideas, meet like-minded individuals, and perhaps rediscover what had first inspired her. But at the same time, she didn't want to lose herself again in the rush of it all. She had seen where that road led, the loneliness, the isolation, the feeling of being pulled in a million directions. Okay, she said softly, as if answering herself, I'm going. Amara spent the next few days preparing for the symposium. She had already started putting together her presentation, excited by the thought of sharing her findings with others who shared her passion. But there was something different this time. She wasn't preparing for the spotlight, or to impress anyone. She was preparing because she wanted to share something real, something she truly believed in. It was no longer about proving herself, it was about the love of the work. The night before her flight to Paris, she stood in her room, looking at the packed suitcase. The papers, the notes, the equations, all neatly organized. She had learned so much in the past few months, but one thing stood out. No matter where she went, no matter what accolades she received, the most important thing was her connection to the work itself. Paris would be the next chapter in her journey, but it would not define her. She would define it. The flight to Paris was long, and Amara spent much of it reflecting on the changes in her life. She had come a long way from the shy, uncertain girl who had first arrived at Harvard, unsure if she belonged in the world of academia. Now, she was on her way to Paris, an opportunity many would kill for, and she was going to embrace it, not as a test of her worth, but as a chance to grow, learn, and connect with others who shared her passion for mathematics. When she finally arrived in Paris, the city's energy was contagious. She could feel the history in the air, the legacy of mathematicians like Pierre-Simon Laplace and Henri Poincaré who had walked these same streets, contributing to the world she now inhabited. The thought filled her with awe. She was standing on the shoulders of giants. But this time, it was different. She wasn't just trying to prove herself. She was there to explore, to learn, and to find her place in the world of mathematics, not as a prodigy or a star, but as Amara. The girl who loved math for the simple joy of it. And that was enough. Amara stood at the back of the Grand Lecture Hall in Paris, taking in the vastness of the room. It was unlike any space she had ever presented in before. The marble floors, the towering columns, and the rows of seats that stretched all the way to the ceiling, it was as if the very air itself held the weight of history. This was the place where some of the greatest minds had gathered, and now, she was about to step onto that stage herself. The Math Institute of Excellence's symposium was unlike any conference she had ever attended. The attendees were some of the most brilliant mathematicians in the world, the kind of people she had read about in textbooks and studied from a distance. Now, she was among them. Her work had earned her a place at the table, but the pressure was overwhelming. She wasn't just Amara the student anymore. She was Amara the presenter, the expert, and in that moment, the weight of the title felt suffocating. As the clock ticked down to her time slot, she couldn't help but feel the familiar rush of nerves. A part of her, the one that had been so determined to prove herself to others, wanted to step back, to shrink away from the spotlight. But another part of her, the part she had been reconnecting with in recent weeks, knew that this was her chance to step into herself. Not to impress, not to prove, but to simply share what she had worked so hard to uncover. She had prepared for this moment, meticulously going over her presentation, reviewing the data, and refining her argument. But now, standing in front of the audience, her mind felt blank. The doubt crept in like an unwelcome shadow. "Amara Cole," a voice called from the front of the room. "Your turn." Amara took a deep breath and walked toward the podium. The bright lights above made her feel exposed, but she steadied herself. She glanced down at her notes, then at the audience, an ocean of faces, some familiar from her previous research, others unknown, all watching her expectantly. For a moment, all the pressure, all the expectations, seemed to swell inside her. But then, she remembered something. Denise's words echoed in her mind, "Do it for you, Amara. Not for anyone else." She placed her notes aside and began, her voice steady but still carrying a hint of nervousness. "Good morning," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "I'm Amara Cole, and today, I'd like to present my findings on the applications of nonlinear equations in understanding quantum mechanics. It's a field I've been passionate about for years, and I believe it holds the potential to redefine certain models we've used in theoretical physics." Her voice grew more confident as she spoke, the familiar excitement of discussing math starting to reignite the passion she had longed for. As she explained the complex theories and presented the data she had worked so hard on, Amara began to feel a shift. The pressure that had weighed her down moments ago started to dissipate. It was still there, but it wasn't suffocating anymore. She wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. She was just explaining what she had discovered, the joy she had found in the numbers and patterns. The room was silent as Amara moved through the slides of her presentation. There was no applause, no interruption, just the quiet hum of attention. She had come to realize that this was exactly how it was supposed to be. She didn't need applause after every slide. She just needed to speak her truth. And she did. After the presentation, Amara was overwhelmed with the rush of emotions that came from stepping out of her comfort zone. The adrenaline from speaking in front of such a distinguished group of mathematicians began to settle, and she found herself feeling strangely calm. The doubts and the fear that had plagued her earlier were replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment. But then came the Q&A session. "Ms. Cole," a voice from the front row said. Amara looked up to see a well-dressed man, his glasses perched on the end of his nose. He was older, his hair graying at the temples, and his demeanor was intense. "Your findings are intriguing, but I must question the validity of your methods. You've made several assumptions that are highly theoretical, and I fail to see how they can be applied in real-world scenarios. Can you elaborate on that?" Amara's heart skipped a beat. The question was sharp, critical, and in front of an entire room full of people. She felt the familiar pang of insecurity creep back in. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. This wasn't the kind of response she had expected. She had anticipated questions, of course, but not like this. Not so direct, so challenging. She took a deep breath, remembering the advice she had given herself earlier: do it for you. "The assumptions I've made are based on the most recent data I've been able to gather," Amara began, her voice shaky at first. "And while the application of these equations to quantum mechanics is still in its early stages, I believe that the potential for innovation is enormous. I know these methods may seem theoretical, but theory is often the birthplace of discovery. As we gather more data, the application will become clearer. I'm not presenting this as a final answer, but as a stepping stone." The man raised an eyebrow but said nothing further. Instead, a woman in the back row spoke up. "I agree with Ms. Cole," she said, her tone more measured but no less critical. "While the work is theoretical, the framework you've created is incredibly valuable. We're in the midst of a transition in the field, and ideas like these could be the key to unlocking the next level of understanding. Keep pushing the boundaries, Ms. Cole. Theories like these are how we move forward." Amara couldn't help but smile. The woman's words were exactly what she needed to hear. The validation wasn't coming from the applause she had once thought she needed, it was coming from the acknowledgement that she had something of value to offer. For the next hour, the questions continued, but Amara's confidence grew with each response. She wasn't just defending her work, she was engaging in a meaningful conversation with people who cared about the same things she did. The pressure of being judged, of being evaluated, faded into the background. It was no longer about impressing anyone, it was about learning and growing together. As the session came to a close, Amara felt a wave of relief wash over her. The event had been intense, but it had also been deeply rewarding. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was just performing. She felt like she was contributing. And that was enough. Later that evening, as she sat in the quiet of her hotel room, she reflected on the day. She had stepped into the world of the world's greatest mathematicians, and instead of shrinking back, she had held her ground. It wasn't about the applause, the praise, or the accolades. It was about the work, and about sharing the passion that had first drawn her to the field. As she looked out at the Paris skyline, Amara realized something important. She didn't need to seek validation from anyone. She didn't need to prove herself. Her value wasn't tied to what others thought of her. Her value was in the work, in the passion, and in the journey of discovery. And that, she thought with a smile, was more than enough. Amara stepped off the plane at Logan International Airport, her mind still buzzing with the whirlwind of her time in Paris. The city, with its blend of history, intellectual stimulation, and the warm acceptance of the mathematical community, had been an unforgettable experience. But now, she was back in Boston, back to Harvard, where her journey had started. The crisp autumn air of New England wrapped around her as she walked toward the taxi stand, the familiar sounds of the city filling the space around her. Harvard had always felt like a world unto itself, but now, it felt different. Her perspective had shifted. The pressure she had once felt to prove herself here had lessened. She was no longer just a student trying to find her place, she was a mathematician with a voice, with ideas that mattered, regardless of whether they were accepted by the most prestigious institutions or not. As the taxi drove through the narrow streets of Cambridge, Amara reflected on her experience at the Math Institute of Excellence's symposium in Paris. The questions, the challenges, the affirmations, it had all reinforced something she had been slowly realizing: her worth was not defined by external validation. She had proven to herself that the joy of discovery, the thrill of exploring the unknown, was enough. When she arrived at her dorm, she walked in and took a deep breath. It felt like home, but also like a place she was ready to outgrow. Her room, cluttered with papers and books, no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a place where the next step in her journey was waiting. But before she could start thinking about that, there was still one task left for her in this chapter of her life: her final presentation at Harvard. Amara had already completed most of her coursework, and now, she was preparing for her final academic presentation in front of her peers and professors. For a moment, the old nerves returned. This presentation was different from the one in Paris. In Paris, she had been among giants, surrounded by people who were open-minded and willing to entertain fresh ideas. Here, however, there were expectations, judgments, and a reputation to uphold. But Amara knew something now that she hadn't fully understood before: the presentation was not about impressing anyone. It wasn't about making others believe in her or her work, it was about sharing something she had worked tirelessly to develop. This was her opportunity to give back to the community that had shaped her, to show them that math was more than just a set of equations, it was a tool for uncovering truths about the world. The day of the presentation arrived, and Amara stood at the front of a packed classroom in the Science Center, a familiar room she had spent countless hours in during her time at Harvard. The faces in the room were a mix of professors and fellow students. She had once been terrified of standing before them, but today, she felt a quiet confidence that had taken root over the past few months. Her slides were set up, her notes were in order, and she felt ready. There were still a few lingering butterflies in her stomach, but they no longer felt like threats. They felt like part of the process, part of the excitement. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice calm but strong. "My name is Amara Cole, and today, I will be discussing the applications of nonlinear equations in understanding quantum mechanics, specifically in relation to particle behavior at the subatomic level." The audience's eyes were fixed on her, and for a brief moment, she felt the weight of their expectations. But instead of succumbing to the pressure, she took a deep breath and continued. "This work is not the final answer. It's a stepping stone. A hypothesis. But I believe it provides a new lens through which we can view certain phenomena. Through the application of nonlinear equations, we can model the unpredictable nature of subatomic particles with greater precision, potentially opening new doors in quantum research." She moved through her slides, explaining the theories behind her work with the same passion that had fueled her at the symposium in Paris. She didn't feel the need to prove herself or win over the room. She simply spoke from her heart. As the presentation progressed, she began to notice a shift. The skeptical looks that she had braced herself for didn't come. Instead, there were nods of understanding and engagement. Her peers and professors were listening, not just to her conclusions, but to her process, her reasoning. The theories were complex, but her explanation was clear. It wasn't just her findings that had value, it was the way she presented them, with honesty and conviction. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Amara felt the familiar pang of nerves return. Had they understood? Had they been moved by what she had said? Then, a professor in the back of the room raised his hand. "That was a compelling argument, Ms. Cole. The implications of your work could change the way we approach quantum mechanics. I'd be interested in discussing it further with you." Amara smiled, but this time, it wasn't the smile of someone relieved that they had gotten through the presentation. It was the smile of someone who had shared their truth, who had found their voice and was confident in their worth, regardless of the response. The days that followed the presentation were filled with discussions, debates, and continued work. But Amara no longer felt the pressure to conform to expectations. She had learned that her path wasn't about fitting into a mold, it was about creating something that was uniquely hers. And the world would catch up. Her professors were impressed by the depth of her research, and many of her peers approached her to discuss her ideas further. But it wasn't the accolades or the praise that mattered. What mattered was the sense of peace she felt, knowing that she was on the right path. She wasn't trying to be anyone else. She wasn't seeking validation. She was simply being herself, a mathematician, a researcher, a creator. As Amara sat in the library one afternoon, looking over her notes, she received a message from Denise. "How did it go?" Amara smiled, typing her response. "It went well. No pressure. No drama. Just me and the math. And for once, I'm okay with that. That's all I ever wanted for you." Amara stared at her phone, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. She wasn't just speaking for herself anymore, she was speaking for the little girl who had fallen in love with math and for the woman she was becoming. And it was enough. The next day, Amara made her way to the quad, the campus a familiar blend of tradition and youthful energy. She passed by students lounging on the grass, professors deep in conversation, and groups of friends laughing together. But this time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She didn't feel the need to prove anything. She was just Amara Cole, no more, no less. And that was all she needed to be. As she walked across the campus, she thought about the future. There would be new challenges, new opportunities. She might even face setbacks. But whatever came next, she knew one thing for sure, she was ready. Ready to walk her own path, with confidence, with passion, and with the quiet knowledge that her value wasn't defined by anyone else, it was defined by the work, the journey, and the love she had for math itself. And that was enough. The days after her final presentation passed in a blur of emails, meetings, and celebratory dinners. Amara was exhausted, mentally and physically, but a quiet joy lingered inside her, a contentment that came from knowing she had stayed true to herself, no matter the outcome. But with her time at Harvard coming to an end, she couldn't ignore the question that loomed over her: what now? She had always been so focused on getting to this point, the point where her research mattered, where her voice was heard, that she hadn't fully considered what came next. The future was wide open, and for the first time in her life, it felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Amara sat at her desk in her dorm room, a cup of coffee cooling beside her as she stared at the screen. She had offers, several, in fact. There was the prestigious research position at MIT, a renowned institute in Paris that had reached out to her after the symposium, and even a promising collaboration with a tech company in Silicon Valley that wanted her to help develop AI models based on her quantum mechanics theories. Each opportunity was tempting. The recognition, the prestige, the opportunity to push her research further than ever before. But as she looked at the offers, Amara felt a wave of uncertainty. For so long, she had been focused on earning these opportunities. Now that they were within her grasp, she couldn't help but wonder if they were what she truly wanted. Were these paths aligned with the life she envisioned, or had she been chasing someone else's dream? Her phone buzzed on the desk, breaking her from her thoughts. It was a text from Denise. "How's it going, Amara? Making the big decisions yet?" Amara sighed, her fingers hovering over the keys as she typed her response. "I have options. But none of them feel right now. I thought I'd be excited, but instead, I'm feeling lost." A few moments later, Denise's reply appeared. "Don't rush it. You've spent your whole life working toward this moment. It's okay to take some time and really think about what you want, not what others expect from you. You've got to follow your heart, girl. You're going to find your way." Amara smiled as she read the message. Denise had always known how to ground her, to remind her of what really mattered. But the truth was, Amara didn't even know where to start. What did she want? The next day, Amara decided to take a break from the decision-making process. She walked through Harvard Yard, the cool air refreshing against her skin, the leaves just beginning to change color. It felt like the perfect moment for some clarity. As she walked, she couldn't help but reflect on her journey. She had come so far, from the girl who sat in the back of the classroom, too scared to ask a question, to the woman who had stood before the world's most prestigious mathematicians and held her ground. She had proven something to herself, and now it was time to figure out what to do with the confidence she had gained. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, it was from her advisor, Dr. Caldwell. "Amara, I know this is a lot to process right now, but I'd like to speak with you about some future opportunities. Please let me know when you have a moment." Amara felt a pang of nervousness. Dr. Caldwell had always been a mentor to her, wise, supportive, and highly respected in the academic world. But there was something about this message that made her uneasy. Was he going to push her toward another path she wasn't sure about? Or was it something else? She quickly texted back. "I'm free this afternoon. Let me know when would be a good time." That afternoon, Amara met Dr. Caldwell in his office. The walls were lined with bookshelves, the shelves filled with volumes on advanced mathematics and quantum theory. The same sense of quiet intellectualism she had grown so accustomed to during her time at Harvard filled the room. "Amara," Dr. Caldwell said warmly as she entered, motioning for her to sit. "I'm glad you could make time to meet." "Of course, Dr. Caldwell," she replied, settling into the chair across from him. "What's on your mind?" He leaned forward, clasping his hands together. "I've been following your work, and I'm incredibly impressed with your progress. The presentation you gave at the symposium in Paris was groundbreaking. Your work has the potential to reshape our understanding of quantum mechanics." Amara felt her heart swell with pride at his words. She had always respected Dr. Caldwell, and hearing his acknowledgement meant more to her than she could put into words. "That means a lot coming from you," she said softly. He smiled. "You've earned it. But I also wanted to talk to you about your next steps. I know you've been offered several prestigious positions, and while they're all excellent opportunities, I'd like to make you an offer as well." Amara's brow furrowed. "What kind of offer?" Dr. Caldwell leaned back in his chair, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made Amara feel like he was trying to assess her very soul. "There's a project I'm starting here at Harvard. It's ambitious, it's challenging, and it's one that could really benefit from your expertise. I believe you're the right person to lead it." Amara's pulse quickened. Leading a project at Harvard, was this what she had been working toward all this time? The prestige, the recognition, the opportunity to build something from the ground up? She took a deep breath. "What kind of project are we talking about?" "It's a cross-disciplinary project involving quantum mechanics, artificial intelligence, and mathematical modeling. We want to develop new algorithms for quantum computing, with the potential to revolutionize industries ranging from healthcare to engineering. The work would be cutting-edge, and you would have the freedom to explore your theories and apply them in ways that could push the boundaries of the field." Amara stared at Dr. Caldwell, her mind spinning. This was the kind of opportunity that many would dream of, and it was right in front of her. But she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't the only path she was meant to follow. Was this the direction she truly wanted to go in, or was it just another milestone on the road to someone else's dream? That evening, Amara returned to her dorm room, feeling the weight of the decision press down on her. She sat at her desk, staring at the offers, the possibilities, the future. She could stay at Harvard, continue her research, and contribute to a project that could shape the future of quantum computing. Or she could pursue one of the other opportunities, perhaps in Paris or Silicon Valley, and dive headfirst into the fast-paced world of technological innovation. But something deep inside her knew that there was more to her future than just climbing the ladder of success. The work was important, but the life she wanted to live was just as crucial. She had spent years chasing external validation, and now, she needed to decide what truly mattered to her. As the moonlight streamed through her window, Amara closed her eyes. The next step wasn't about the offers or the prestige, it was about following the path that would bring her the most fulfillment. The work was important, but so was the person she was becoming. And whatever decision she made, she knew she had the strength to make it her own. The weeks following her meeting with Dr. Caldwell were a whirlwind of contemplation, reflection, and quiet moments of clarity. The offers were all impressive, each one representing a different facet of her dream: prestige, advancement, innovation, and exploration. But they also represented the next step in a journey that had begun many years ago when a young girl in a small classroom had first fallen in love with the beauty of numbers and equations. But now, standing at the precipice of her future, Amara knew that her journey wasn't about checking off boxes on a list. It wasn't about proving herself to anyone anymore, not to Harvard, not to the world, and certainly not to anyone who had doubted her potential. The truth was, Amara had already proven everything she needed to prove. The decision came down to this: what kind of life did she want to build for herself? The morning was cold as Amara made her way to the quad, the wind carrying the scent of falling leaves and crisp autumn air. The campus felt different now, quieter somehow, like it was holding its breath before something big would happen. Or maybe it was her who was holding her breath, uncertain but sure of what she needed to do next. She took a seat at the bench near the sculpture garden, the one that had always been her favorite spot to reflect when the weight of Harvard's history felt too heavy. Here, she had sat many times before, wrestling with the pressure to succeed, wondering if she was enough. Now, she was wondering what would happen if she simply chose to trust herself. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. She pulled it out and saw a message from Denise. Still thinking it over? Amara smiled. Denise had been her constant source of support, always there with a word of wisdom, even from afar. She typed her reply. Yes, but I think I finally know what I need to do. A moment later, Denise replied. Good. Trust your gut. You've got this. Amara looked out at the campus, the familiar sights grounding her as the sun slowly rose higher in the sky. The truth was, she didn't need all the answers. What she needed was to step forward with faith in her abilities, with trust in her intuition, and the willingness to embrace uncertainty. It was a leap, one that would change the course of her life. And just like that, she made the decision. Later that afternoon, Amara walked into Dr. Caldwell's office, her heart pounding in her chest. He was there, waiting, a stack of papers in front of him, the same warm smile on his face. But today, there was something different in the air, a shift, a quiet understanding that the moment had arrived. Amara, Dr. Caldwell said, his voice filled with curiosity. I'm glad you could make it. Thank you for meeting with me again, she said, taking a seat across from him. She paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts before speaking. I've given it a lot of thought, and I've made a decision. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes sharp, yet kind. I'm all ears. Amara took a deep breath, the weight of her choice still heavy on her chest, but no longer overwhelming. I'm not going to take the offer to stay at Harvard. As much as I admire the work you're doing and the potential of the project, I've realized that I need to explore something else. I need to take my research in a direction that isn't confined to the academic world, where I can create something that has a broader impact. Dr. Caldwell looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Amara's heart skipped a beat, but she held his gaze. I've spent so much time trying to be what I thought I was supposed to be, she continued, her voice steady. But I've learned that the kind of change I want to make doesn't fit within the traditional boundaries of academia. I need to break out of those boundaries, to apply my work in real-world situations where it can make a tangible difference. He nodded slowly, as though he had expected this. Amara, I respect your decision, and I can't say I'm not disappointed. But I understand. You've always been one to chart your own course. Amara smiled, feeling the weight lift off her shoulders. Thank you, Dr. Caldwell. Your mentorship has meant more to me than I can express. I hope that, in some way, we can still collaborate in the future. You're always welcome here, Amara, he said, offering a genuine smile. You've got a bright future ahead of you. I have no doubt about that. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the lights of Cambridge flickered to life, Amara sat by her window, reflecting on her decision. It was a leap into the unknown, and though it felt terrifying, it also felt right. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but she knew it would be shaped by her choices, not by the expectations of others. The next few days were a whirlwind of final meetings, farewells, and goodbyes. She had made peace with leaving behind the life she had built at Harvard, but it wasn't an easy thing to do. There were so many memories, so many connections that had shaped her into the woman she was today. But now, it was time to step into the future with a renewed sense of purpose. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, it was from Denise. You did it, didn't you? Tell me everything. Amara typed her response with a smile. I did. I made the leap. I'm stepping into the unknown. And it feels incredible. Denise's response came quickly. I knew you had it in you. This is just the beginning, Amara. You're going to change the world. Amara smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. The next step was unknown, but that was the point. Life wasn't about having all the answers, it was about being willing to take the leap, trusting that you would find your way along the way. She stood up, walked to her desk, and opened her laptop. There were new projects to explore, new research to dive into, and new challenges to face. But for the first time in a long while, Amara felt ready. She wasn't just chasing a dream anymore. She was creating her own path, and that was enough. As Amara walked through the streets of Cambridge one last time before leaving for her next adventure, she felt the weight of her decision settle into a sense of excitement. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was certain, she was no longer afraid of the unknown. She had the tools, the confidence, and the passion to carve out her own place in the world. The future was hers for the taking, and Amara was ready to embrace it. Amara sat at her desk, a cup of tea steaming gently beside her as she gazed out of the window at the sprawling city below. The noise of the bustling streets reached her ears faintly, but her mind was elsewhere, thinking of all that had led her here, and all that lay ahead. She had made the leap away from the well-trodden path of academia, toward a future of limitless possibilities. But now that she had stepped away from Harvard and the offers that had once seemed so perfect, she found herself at a new crossroads. She had moved to Silicon Valley, to a small startup that specialized in applying quantum computing to real-world problems. The city was everything she had imagined, fast-paced, innovative, and full of energy. It felt like the perfect environment for someone like her, someone who didn't just want to follow in the footsteps of others but to forge her own way, to create something new. The startup's headquarters was an old brick building, transformed into a modern workspace with glass walls, open-plan offices, and a constant hum of activity. It was here, surrounded by brilliant minds, that Amara found herself starting a new chapter of her journey. But even amidst the excitement of new projects and the thrill of solving complex problems, something lingered in the back of her mind, the question of whether she had truly made the right decision. It wasn't that she regretted leaving Harvard. On the contrary, she knew it had been the right choice. But the transition had not been easy. The world of academia had been her comfort zone, and stepping away from it meant leaving behind more than just a career path. It meant leaving behind an identity she had worked so hard to build. The first few weeks had been a blur of new faces, new ideas, and new challenges. She quickly realized that the world of startups was very different from the academic sphere. There was no clear structure, no rigid expectations. Everything was fluid, constantly evolving, and this had both its benefits and its frustrations. She was used to knowing exactly what was expected of her, of adhering to a set curriculum, and meeting predefined goals. In the startup world, however, everything was about adapting quickly, thinking on your feet, and taking risks. One afternoon, as Amara sat in a meeting with her new team, she found herself drawn into an intense discussion about the next phase of their quantum computing project. The team was debating how to approach a new challenge in their algorithm development. Ideas were flying back and forth, with some people pushing for one approach, while others argued for a completely different strategy. Amara leaned forward, her mind working quickly. The debate was fierce, but she could see the bigger picture. She saw the potential for a solution that others hadn't thought of, one that could bring everything together in a way that none of the other approaches could. She cleared her throat and spoke up, her voice steady and confident. "I think we're looking at this problem from the wrong angle," she began. "What if, instead of trying to solve the issue in isolation, we incorporate elements of machine learning into the algorithm? I believe we could use predictive modeling to identify patterns in the data that we haven't yet accounted for. This could significantly reduce the processing time, which would make our algorithm more efficient." The room went silent for a moment as the team processed her suggestion. Then, one by one, the team members nodded, impressed by the insight she had offered. They began to discuss the idea further, and soon, they were working together to refine the approach. Amara felt a surge of satisfaction. This was what she had been craving, working on something that could have a direct impact, not just in theory but in practice. It was the kind of work that could change industries, improve lives, and push the boundaries of what was possible. It was exactly the kind of challenge she had been looking for when she left Harvard. That evening, Amara walked back to her apartment, her mind still buzzing from the meeting. The decision to leave the comfort of academia had been a leap into the unknown, but it was starting to feel like the right one. She had found her place in the world of innovation, where ideas were born out of necessity, and where success depended not just on knowledge but on creativity and collaboration. When she reached her apartment, she sat down at her desk, her laptop open in front of her. She thought about the countless hours she had spent in the quiet halls of Harvard, the research, the long nights, the presentations. But now, everything felt different. The focus was no longer just on theory, it was about taking what she had learned and applying it to solve real problems. As she reflected on how far she had come, Amara realized that the journey wasn't just about the destination, it was about the evolution of who she was along the way. She wasn't just a mathematician or a scientist, she was someone who had the power to shape the future, to make a difference. Her phone buzzed again, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Denise. "How's it going, Amara? You've been quiet lately. Figured you'd be out there changing the world by now." Amara smiled and quickly typed her reply. "I'm getting there. It's been a lot of work, but I think I'm finally finding my place. And I think it's the right place." Denise's response came quickly. "I knew you'd figure it out. You've always had the drive, Amara. Just don't forget to enjoy the ride. Success is great, but it's the journey that makes it worth it." Amara nodded to herself, knowing that Denise was right. She had spent so much time focused on getting to the next milestone that she had forgotten to pause and appreciate the process. Now, in the midst of all the uncertainty and excitement, she promised herself that she would savor the moments, the small victories, the moments of growth. She closed her laptop, stood up, and walked to the window. The city lights twinkled below, and she felt a sense of calm wash over her. The future was still unwritten, but for the first time in a long time, Amara was at peace with that. She didn't need to know every detail. She didn't need to have everything planned out. She was exactly where she needed to be. And as she looked out over the city, Amara knew one thing for certain, she was ready for whatever came next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?